Donald. I am 72 years old, a widower, and the father of an only daughter. I've seen a lot in this life, but nothing prepared me for what happened last Father's Day. Have you ever felt like you were just a detail in the life of someone you created with everything you had? Have you ever had the impression that the more you give, the less they see you? The question that torments me to this day is, how did a daughter I raised with so much love manage to treat me as if I were nothing? I understand if you came here wanting to understand this absurd story. A luxury cruise for father-in-law, and a $2 lottery ticket for me. It sounds like a joke, but it wasn't. And what this note caused, everything changed. If you have a child, or have already been left aside by someone in your own family, stay with me until the end. You will see how a gesture of contempt can turn into the biggest upset in life, because there are things that no money buys, and there are lessons that only time and pain teach. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. On that Father's Day, sitting at the head of the table in my own house, I smiled on the outside, and I collapsed inside. My daughter's father-in-law won a luxury cruise paid for with money taken from my account without me knowing. And me? I won a $2 lottery ticket, with a mocking laugh and a phrase I'll never forget. If you win, half is mine. What she didn't know, and neither did I at the time, is that that musty piece of paper, tossed with contempt, was carrying $120 million. But it wasn't money that changed me. That's what I saw in my daughter's eyes at that dinner, and what came after. If you have ever gone through a disappointment that left you speechless, if you have already been erased by those who should protect you, I invite you to walk with me in this memory. And if my outburst touches your heart in any way, leave a like and subscribe. Not out of obligation, but as a sign that there is still room, even in silence, for stories like mine. Because this, I need to tell you. I woke up early that Sunday. Even with my bones aching and the loneliness already old, I made sure to arrange everything carefully. The living room table, which has almost never seen people since my wife left, got a clean tablecloth, porcelain plates that we kept for special dates, and a flower arrangement that I chose myself at the market. Thinking about Rachel's smile, I bought first-class meat, seasoned it the way she liked it when she was a girl. I made that pulp juice for my grandson, even though I knew he might not even drink it. Every gesture of mine that day had hope to be remembered not as a burden, but as a father. They arrived almost an hour late. Rachel came in a hurry, talking on the phone, and gave me a quick kiss, half in the air. Eric, as always, seemed to be in a more important place than there. Expensive suit, sunglasses on his head, and the fake smile of someone who feels bored in the family. Behind them came Mr. Whitaker, Rachel's father-in-law. A tall, arrogant man with that way of someone who always speaks a little louder than he should. He greeted me with a, "What's up, mechanic?" as if it were an inside joke. I smiled. Polite. I always smiled. Sit. The food was cooling on the table, but no one seemed to care. Rachel was striking up a conversation with her father-in-law about a new venture in Miami. Eric talked about stocks, investments, things he knew I didn't follow. I listened to everything quietly, just wanting that family moment that was already so rare. After the main course, came the moment of gifts. Mr. Whitaker opened his first, a black velvet box. Inside, 2 cruise tickets to the Caribbean. First class, cabin with balcony, all paid for. Rachel laughed out loud when he read the accompanying letter. To the most important man in my financial life. Everyone laughed, even me, but the laughter stuck in his throat. When it was my turn, Rachel reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled paper. He threw it on the table near my plate. "There, Dad. If you win, remember me, huh?" It was a lottery ticket. Powerball. $2. She said that laughing, as if it were child's play. I looked around. Eric took a sip of wine. The father-in-law adjusted the napkin on his lap. My grandson used to play with his cell phone. Nobody said anything. I took the note calmly, tried to smile. But inside, something in me broke at that moment. Forgive me for the pause, but let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room full of people, and yet you felt invisible? Have you ever tried to disguise the pain with a smile, just so as not to ruin the moment of others? If you've experienced something like this, comment below with a simple, "I understand," or "I've felt it," because there is pain that only those who have lived it can recognize in the eyes of the other. The dessert came, and I don't even remember the taste. Rachel spoke of the cruise as if it were a dream she had lived herself. He told the details of the cabin, the excursions, the drinks included. When he mentioned the amount, more than $13,000, I almost choked. But I swallowed hard. I looked at her. So safe, so at ease, as if nothing was out of place. Later, when everyone left, I collected the table alone. The used napkins, the glasses with lipstick on the rim, the remains of the dinner I prepared with so much care. Everything seemed to mock me. The $2 ticket was still on the table, crumpled, dirty with grease. I picked him up, looked again. "If you win, remember me." That's what she said. And that's when something bit me inside. A feeling that I didn't know if it was anger, sadness, or just an emptiness so big that it didn't even hurt anymore. But that same day, while I was washing the dishes, something even stranger came to my mind. What if that note, worth more than it seemed, and if that piece of paper, thrown as alms, was in fact the key to everything changing? The next morning I woke up before the sun rose. Not because of the time, but because my head wouldn't let it rest. I spent the whole night reviewing that dinner in my mind. Eric's muffled laugh when Rachel spoke of serious investing, as if to say, that old man doesn't understand anything. The way Mr. Whitaker dominated the conversation, as if he were sitting in his house, and not in mine. And Rachel who barely looked into my eyes all night, who handed a $13,000 cruise to her father-in-law with the same lightness that she threw a dirty paper at me. That didn't leave my head. I stood there in the living room chair, looking at the old photos on the shelf. My wife smiling with Rachel on her lap, family Christmases, her college diploma that I helped pay for by selling my truck. Everything seemed like another life, one that I delivered whole, and that now gave me back silence and contempt. I got up with a knot in my chest. I went to the kitchen, made strong coffee. I sat in front of the old laptop that I still use to pay bills and answer some emails. I opened my bank statement more out of habit than distrust. But when I saw the value on the screen, my stomach turned. A recent transaction of $13,476 had been debited from my account. Agency, Premium Travel Advisors in the city center. Date, 3 days before Father's Day. At the time, the penny dropped. Rachel's gift to her father-in-law was not paid for by her. It was with my money. Money that was there saved for an emergency, for surgery or whatever, for one of those unforeseen events that life always throws when we least expect it. That joint account I've kept open since my wife passed away. I left it there as protection, trust, love. Rachel used it as if it was her right. I got up from my chair with my hands shaking. I opened the drawer where I kept her old card. It was still there. I never thought I'd need to block, because in my heart, she would never do that. I would never use my money without talking to me. He would never treat his own father as a safe without a password. But it did. I remember that I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I was staring at nothing, trying to understand. The anger came lightly, like a trickle of hot water running down his chest. But next to her came a sadness that crushed, that feeling of being deceived by someone you raised in your arms. I wondered, does she see me only as a burden? Could it be that in her mind everything I have is hers by right? I closed my eyes and remembered when I opened that account in the name of both of them. Rachel had just lost her mother. She was fragile. I wanted to make everything easier. I told her, if one day I have a heart attack, you can solve everything. She cried at the time. He said he would never touch without permission. And I believed it, because we believe in children. We believe even when the whole world has already shown that it is not worth it. I went down to the living room again. I looked at the lottery ticket, still there, on the table. Her phrase echoed in my head, "If you win, remember me." As if she hadn't already taken much more than $2 from me. As if it wasn't enough to steal from me in silence. Still mocked, calling me lucky. There, sitting in that room, I felt that something inside me was changing. It was as if an innocent part that still believed in unconditional affection had died. Not angry, but with a bitter lucidity. Because when we discover that we have not been remembered either as a father or as a human being, the soul creates a new kind of silence, one who speaks too loudly in here. And it was in this silence that a question began to hammer non-stop. If she was able to take more than 13,000 without blinking, what else is it capable of? That answer I was yet to find out, and when I found out, there was no going back. I waited for the clock to strike 9 in the morning. I thought it would be a good time to call. Not too early to bother, not too late to look like despair. I still wanted to believe that there was some explanation, that maybe it had been a mistake, that maybe she had forgotten to warn me. I dialed her number slowly, as if each number was a step in a dark hallway. When she answered, the voice came dry, hurried. "Dad, now I can't, I'm in a meeting." I swallowed the pain and calmly replied, "Rachel, I need to talk about something important. Yesterday, at dinner, that gift for Mr. Whitaker. You paid with my card, weren't you?" She paused shortly, sighed impatiently, and spoke as if giving an order. "Yes, I did. It was a trip he had wanted for years. He deserves it. And you? Well, you have money sitting around. You wouldn't use it for anything at all." I was mute for a few seconds. Her voice was so firm, so cold, as if it was obvious, as if it was my mistake for questioning. I tried to keep my tone down. "You took $13,000 out of my account, Rachel, without asking. This is theft." On the other end of the line, I heard laughter. That laugh that was no longer hers, it was from someone I didn't recognize. "Theft, Dad? For God's sake, it's family money. You've already done what you had to do for me, now relax." And then, silence. She expected me to accept it as a new reality, as if I had expired my expiration date, as if it were natural to use me every last drop, then push me into the corner with a $2 note and a "thank you." I don't remember hanging up. I only realized it when I looked at the phone and it was on the home screen. My hands trembled. Her words were not spoken in anger. They were said with something worse: indifference. In her mind, I was a resource, a bank balance with legs. And now, no longer useful. I sat there in the armchair in the living room, feeling my body sink but my mind awake, as if a curtain had been pulled by force. So many years of sacrifice, of renunciations, of nights turning to ensure her future. And in the end, I was no longer a father. It was just a number, but it was just the beginning. Because what she did next, it even took away my right to doubt. I spent the rest of that whole day sitting in the same chair in the living room, without turning on the television, without touching the phone, without answering anything, just looking at the time, the silence, and the photos on the shelf. Photos that now seemed to stare back at me. Rachel as a child with that toothless smile sitting on my lap after a run in the park. I was there, younger, sweaty, tired, but with the fullest look in the world. I saw myself in every frame. I saw myself in that father who spent sleepless nights to make the money last. I saw myself in that man who sold tools from the workshop to pay for her summer course, just because she said she wanted to learn French. I saw myself in that old man who refused invitations from the neighbors to the Saturday barbecue because he needed to work overtime, and yet he bought her ice cream when the truck passed on the street. And now I wasn't even remembered with respect. I was an account number, a safe with legs, as my chest insisted on repeating. I remembered the time she got sick with a high fever. I had a night shift, but I was next to her bed the whole time. I remember the wet towel on her forehead, the stories I told quietly until she fell asleep. The next day I went to work facing up, and when I came back she hugged me and said, "Daddy, you're my hero." That stayed with me for decades. Only now, that hero wasn't even good for a decent lunch on Father's Day. A hero replaced by a dapper father-in-law and a cruise paid for with betrayal. We grow old hoping that time will give us some peace. But what I got was a mute wound. One of those that don't bleed, but that weigh like lead. I didn't cry. Believe me, I wanted to. But the crying did not come. Only emptiness. The silence inside me was so loud that I felt my ears ringing. If you're still listening to this story, I'm here opening my heart, telling every little bit of this life that pushed me into the shadows. So if you can, leave a like on that video and subscribe to the channel. It's not just for me. It's because I still have a lot of things stored in here, and maybe at some point this will also speak to you. And as the daylight faded through the window, the memories kept coming, like daggers. Each good memory turned into a thorn, every gesture of the past, a charge. And the more I remembered how much I gave, the more I asked myself, where did I get lost, or rather, where did she lose me? But there, in that room, between the silence and the shadows of the afternoon, something else began to be born. It wasn't hate. It was not a desire for revenge. It was something else. A silent decision. Something inside me said that I could no longer be silent. And that's when I looked at the trash. And I saw something in the middle. That everything began to change. The morning light was already invading the kitchen when I got up from the living room chair. The spine hurt, the body heavy, but it wasn't the body that hurt the most. It was in here. I went to the kitchen to get more coffee, and there, on the table, still stained with grease from the night before, was the damn note. The same piece of paper that she threw with disdain, as someone who throws leftovers to the dog. I kept looking at him. The already greasy edge, a wine stain in the left corner, and the numbers there, printed with that vagabond ink that fades easily. For a moment, I picked up the note carefully. I turned around. I watched. I saw myself there. I was that paper, crumpled, dirty, ignored. That's what hurt. The note was the joke, but I was the target. I was the one who fell like a fool, believing that Father's Day was still a day to be remembered. I didn't think twice. I angrily crumpled the note. A tight, dry fist. I opened the cupboard under the sink, threw it in the trash without looking. I stood still for a few seconds, my hand still closed, my chest burning. I felt like crying, but I couldn't, and it had been years since I cried. Maybe because life is hardening us slowly. It teaches you to be silent, to swallow, to smile with your stomach turned, and when you see it, you don't know how to let it hurt anymore. I grabbed the coffee mug, took a cold sip. The taste no longer meant anything to me. I washed the cup without haste and went out into the street. I needed to walk. He needed to put his head in order, or at least let it spread in the wind. I crossed the gate and walked slowly along the sidewalk of the neighborhood, as I used to do on Sundays when I took Rachel to the playground. I passed by the school where I dropped her off every morning, when she still fit in the front seat of the car with her feet dangling. I remembered the snack tickets she forgot to take. From the drawings she pasted on the fridge saying, "I love you, Dad." All of this now seemed from another world. I went to the corner, turned right, and saw the park bench where she asked me to push on the swing. "Taller, Dad. Louder," she shouted, and I pushed until my arms hurt, just to see her laugh, and to think that now, so many years later, she was the one pushing me, but out of her life. A cold push, disguised as normality. I walked a little more and stopped in front of the old shop where I bought gum and soda when I picked her up from school. The owner of the shop, Mr. Brantley, had been dead for a few years, but the sign was still there. Everything was there, except for Rachel, except for that time, except for that father who still believed that a son's love was sacred. I sat on a wooden bench, took a deep breath and closed my eyes. The wind hit his face lightly, an autumn wind. And there in the silence of that street where we were once happy, I could only ask myself, did she ever really see me? Or is it what I was to her? Was it always just a function? Only stares? And it was at that moment, sitting there, that something began to form inside me. A strange feeling which mixed loss with clarity. It's a feeling that that story was still far from over, because sometimes it's just what they throw in the trash that changes everything. The next day, still with a heavy head, I heard the cell phone vibrate on the living room table. It was a message from Rachel. I took a deep breath before opening it. Part of me was still waiting for an apology, a gesture, a word that would show an ounce of regret. But what I read was the opposite of that, a dry, cold punch packed in a few words. "I talked to Eric. You're exaggerating. We'll give you that money back for Christmas, okay?" Without an excuse, without a father, without even a comma of respect. It was as if I were a grumpy old man, making drama over something unimportant. As if $13,000 was just end of month, something you can play with, take out and return whenever you want. But more than the money, it was the tone. The tone that said, "You're getting in the way. Shut up and wait." I felt my chest sink again, but this time, in a different way. It was not sadness. It was clarity. That kind of silence that comes when we finally understand what we have spent our whole lives trying to deny. There, on that dull morning, it was clear to me that I had spent the last 30 years building a one-way relationship, where I gave and she drank, where love has become an obligation, where respect was optional. I always gave in, thinking that one day it would become recognition, but it didn't. I sat staring at the message for a long time. Every word seemed to have been hand-picked to diminish me. And maybe it does. Maybe she doesn't see me as a father anymore. Maybe he just sees me as a burden, an old man who has already given what he had to give. And in that instant, something in me changed. Slowly, but definitely. For the first time in my life, I thought about protecting myself. Not out of revenge, not to pay back, but out of respect. For me. For this man who worked 3 shifts, who spent nights in the hospital, who was alone grieving while pretending that everything was fine just so she wouldn't be scared. I deserved better than that text, more than being treated as a leftover. And let me tell you something that you may need to hear. Sometimes the person who hurts us the most, it is precisely the one that we have protected the most. And when that happens, the pain doesn't come with screaming. It comes with silence. And it is in this silence that the most difficult decision of all lives. If you've made it this far, stay with me. Because, as much as everything already seems sad, what comes next? It will change everything. It's strange to think that a piece of paper forgotten in the trash can become the center of a hurricane. But that's exactly what happened. Because what I did next, no one expected it, much less her. That same afternoon, after taking a deep breath and accepting what my heart was already screaming, I called the bank. The attendant was polite, but I could feel the discomfort in her voice when I explained the reason for the call. Yes, Mr. Donald, we can remove your daughter's name from the joint account. I just need to confirm some information. I confirmed everything precisely, like someone reading a will. When she told me, "Okay, sir, now only you have access," I felt no relief. I felt mourning, because that was the end of a confidence that I had carried for decades like a medallion on my chest. Turned off. I opened the website, changed passwords, activated notifications, everything I should have done years ago. But we always think that love is a shield. But sometimes, love is the open door through which we are plundered. After that, I looked around the house. It was as if every corner had her voice at various ages. A box of old drawings in the living room closet. A graduation album that I put together myself with adhesive and tape. Even the wedding dress that her mother had so jealously kept in a plastic bag inside my room. All that now hurt my eyes, because it made it clear that everything that once shone had become just emotional dust. I put things together one by one. I threw away the letters she wrote me as a teenager, Father's Day cards with "Best Dad in the World" written in crayons, even a CD she recorded singing Avril Lavigne music, thinking she was going to be an artist. Everything went to waste, one by one, and each object that fell into the black bag was as if I took another brick from a house that had been collapsing for a long time. Only now I was the only one hearing the cracks of the cracks. I stopped in the kitchen, looked around, and then I remembered. The ticket. That damn piece of paper. I went to the garbage, rummaged through the orange peels, the coffee grounds, and there he was. Mashed, dirty, with a slight gravy mark on the tip. I took it carefully. It was just paper, but it felt like it burned my hand. I stood there looking at the erased numbers and thought, will even this embarrass me? Will even that remind me of how stupid I was? Forgive me for the pause, but sometimes I wonder if every parent has this moment. That moment when we realize that we created too much, trusted too much, waited too much. And when the truth comes, she doesn't scream. She just pulls over and whispers, "You've been left behind." If you've ever felt this, comment below with a "I know how it is" or "I understand you." Because this pain changes us. And who has been through this? No. I put the ticket on the counter. I stared at him as if facing an old hurt. And it was there, in that second, that a strange idea began to form. It was not hope. It was more of a feeling, as if something or someone was about to turn the tide. I just didn't know yet that that note was more than a symbol. It was a door, and it was about to open up. It was already night when I turned on the television, not because I wanted to watch anything, but because the silence of the house was starting to swallow me. And sometimes just the noise of any program already gives you a feeling that someone is there with you. I went through the channels slowly without much direction until I stopped at a local news program. They were almost done when the anchor looked at the camera and said, "And for you at home who bet on Powerball this week, pay attention. The numbers of the accumulated draw are..." Then she started talking, and I remember it as if it were now. First issue, 7, after, 14, next, 23, 35, and 42, and finally, the Powerball, 18. At the time, my whole body froze. I knew those numbers. I had seen them before, more than once, but not on TV. They were on the note, that dirty paper that had gone to waste with the smell of contempt and greasy. I stood up as if I had been shocked. I went to the kitchen, pushed the lid of the trash can in a hurry, I started to turn everything over with my hand, without gloves, without disgust. Banana peel, dirty napkin, leftover meat, until I found it. The ticket. Crumpled, half torn at the edge, with a coffee blot in the middle of the numbers, but it was still possible to read. Shivering, I took him to the sink. I opened it with the greatest care I have ever had in my life. I rinsed it with warm water. I dried it with a clean kitchen towel. I put them on the counter and grabbed my glasses. One by one, I read the numbers. Powerball, 18. My heart was beating in my ear. I went to the phone, dialed the number that appeared on the TV screen, the official lottery line. A recording answered. If your numbers are 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, and Powerball 18, congratulations. You just won the week's jackpot, $120 million. At that moment, I felt no joy, nor euphoria, nor will I want to jump. I just sat down, slowly, on a kitchen chair that creaked under my weight, and I stayed there, in silence, looking at the note that almost left with the garbage, the same role she played in front of me, laughing, the same one she used to humiliate me. It was now the key to a door that I never imagined I could open. Funny how life is. Sometimes what they throw in our face as a joke, it is exactly what God chooses to turn our story around. I stayed in that kitchen for hours, without saying anything, without moving a muscle, just looking at that piece of paper and feeling something new inside me. It was not revenge, it was something else. A kind of calm justice. Silent, as if the universe had whispered, now it's your turn. But then came the question that didn't want to be silenced. What to do with all this? Because when luck comes by the hand of the one who hurt you, what do we do with it? I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat at the kitchen table with the note in front of me, now dry, clean, and stored inside a clear plastic bag I found at the bottom of the Ziploc drawer. It didn't even look like the same crumpled, dirty paper I almost threw away with the garlic skins. It was as if that piece of paper had been reborn, just like me. But unlike many, I didn't feel euphoria. Not a drop. I didn't feel like screaming or running to tell anyone. What I felt was lucidity. For the first time in a long, long time, my mind was clear, silent, need, as if everything I had lived so far had prepared me for this moment. I kept remembering a phrase I always said to my wife in the times when the world still made sense. Kindness is not weakness, but it needs to have a limit. And at that moment, I understood that my limit had come. She wasn't here to see it, but I know she would understand. She who so many times asked me to stop giving everything, accepting everything, who told me quietly in bed that I deserved rest. Well, it was time to rest from guilt. I took an old notebook, one of those spiral notebooks with a plastic cover, and started writing. Line by line, I wrote down what needed to be done. First, authenticate the ticket. Then, look for the lottery office in Columbus. Find out what was needed to validate. Lawyer, accountant, discretion, silence, confidentiality. It wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming what was taken from me without permission. Dignity. That's it. No one else would be able to buy that. The next day, very early, I called the official Powerball number. I spoke with a calm attendant who guided me about the documents and deadlines. I wrote everything down. No rush, no dazzle, just focus. Every step I took was like rebuilding the ground beneath my feet. I went down to the basement and picked up an old leather briefcase that held my important papers. I placed the note inside, with 2 layers of plastic and between pages of a thick book. Atlas Shrugged, which my wife loved. It fit there as if it had been made for that, and I kept the briefcase in the back of the closet behind the winter clothes. Nobody knew. No one could know. My first attitude was simple and definitive. Total silence. No call for Rachel. No message. No signal. She didn't deserve to be the first to know, nor the second, not even the 10th, because whoever throws a gift in his own father's lap as a joke, he has no right to know how much this gift was worth, not even in cash, not even in justice. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes we think we're alone, but it only takes a story like this for us to discover that there are more people feeling the same, but silent. I closed the notebook, looked out the window, and took a deep breath. The sky was clear, without any clouds, and for the first time in a long time I felt whole. Not because of the 120 million, but because anyway I was in control of my story. For the first time I was going to decide the ending. But of course, no secret is kept forever. And the day she found out, it was a separate chapter. Because when silence begins to speak, no one comes out unscathed. That morning I put on my blue flannel shirt, the same one I wore to my wife's funeral, and then put it in the back of the closet, as if storing clothes would keep memory. The March wind cut through the streets of Columbus like a razor. The sky was gray, but there was something different in the air. A less heavy silence. I walked slowly along the sidewalks to the Ohio Lottery Commission building, which stood towering in the center of the city, mirroring the sky and the rush of the people around. I entered with the leather briefcase pressed to my chest, as if carrying not a note but my own soul folded and sealed in silence. The receptionist looked at me kindly and directed me to a reserved room. Inside, I was greeted by a firm, calm-spoken Asian woman, Janet Chen. The badge read. She asked for my documents, took the note carefully, and without much conversation began the verification process. Lights, sensors, digital reading of paper. I sat there, hands sweating, my heart slow and heavy. When she returned, holding a clipboard and an envelope, her eyes had the twinkle of someone who was about to change a life. Mr. Donald Harris, you are officially the winner of Powerball. Total prize amount, $120 million. I didn't cry. He doesn't even smile. I just lowered my eyes. I thought of my wife's rocking chair, in Rachel's school popcorn cart, in the meat that I stopped buying because the price went up. I thought of everything, and at that moment I felt more tired than happy. Janet explained the process to me. Taxes, confidentiality, the legal deadline. He introduced me to the payment options, in installments over 30 years or the full amount with a discount. I chose the one-time payment. I didn't want to build anything else. I wanted to close. Close with dignity. I left the building and the wind hit me hard in the face. But for the first time, that cold didn't shrink me. It woke me up. It has firmed me up. I was there whole, not as a millionaire, but as a man who finally had his own destiny in his hands. And it's curious how, sometimes freedom doesn't come when we receive it, but when we let go. I was no longer afraid, neither of losing nor of being alone, because for the first time I knew what I was worth, and no one could steal that. Let me tell you something from the heart. Stay with me until the end of this story, because the most difficult moment has not yet been counted. What comes now is not about the money. It's about the truth. And the truth, it always takes its toll. And when I got home that afternoon, with firmer steps than ever, I found 3 missed calls from Rachel and a voice message that, well, you need to listen. Because it was at that moment that everything started to fall apart. Not for me, for her. When I got home, I found 3 missed calls from Rachel and a voicemail. The tone was different. No irritation, no impatience. It was a sweet, almost childlike voice. Dad, hi. Call me, okay? I'm seeing something here. I'm shaking. Call me, please. I didn't even need to listen twice to understand what had happened. The name Donald Harris had escaped. A silly leak, perhaps, but enough to become a rumor in a small town. A lottery employee, one of those who can't keep a secret even about their own breakfast. Let slip to someone's cousin that a man from Columbus, a former mechanic, had taken the Powerball jackpot. In less than 2 hours, the name ran wild through the neighborhood's Facebook groups, city forums, neighbors commenting in the bakery. Rachel saw the news on a page called The Columbus Community Bulletin. The headline, Discreet resident of the North region wins $120 million in Powerball. And that was enough. The phone rang again. I answered. On the other side, she was almost screaming in euphoria. Dad, is that you? Talk to me. For God's sake, speak up. I took a deep breath and just said, yes. The call was muted for half a second. Then she exploded. My God, Dad. Half is mine, remember? I gave you that note. I was silent for a moment. I let the weight of her words hang in the air. Then, in the calmest voice I've ever used in my life, I replied, Rachel, the note was a gift. And I hung up. 5 minutes later, the damage began. She posted a photo on Facebook holding a glass of wine with the caption, Proud of my dad. I gave him luck, and now we will share this victory together. The post exploded. Comments, likes, people congratulating, emojis, gifs, congratulatory messages for the wonderful daughter. who believed in her father until the end. And then came Eric, with a short video. Guys, it's true. My wife gave the note. Luck stayed in the family. The likes doubled. The congratulatory messages multiplied. And my story, once buried in the silence of my house, has become a public spectacle. But not the truth. The lie. The cruelest part was not even seeing the circus setting up. It was the tone with which she spoke. Certainty. The naturalness with which he distorted everything, as if he had already rehearsed years ago, as if believing that everything is hers was easier than admitting that she made a mistake. I sat on the couch, grabbed a blanket, and stood there quietly, listening to the echo of his own name on the local TV news. A smiling reporter said, Donald Harris, a resident of suburban Columbus, has not yet officially commented, but relatives say that the fortune will be shared with his daughter, who presented him with the note. I turned off the TV. Funny how some memories stick to us like the smell of coffee in a dishcloth. The first time Rachel called me a hero, the day he fell off his bike and asked for a lap, and now this lie varnished with a fake smile. And if you on the other side have ever been through something like this, where they erased you from history to put yourself at the center, tell me in the comments. It can be an I know what it's like, or just a good or bitter memory, because sometimes venting is like turning on a light in a dark corner of your chest. Meanwhile, my decision remained firm. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to respond angrily. The world could speak. They could invent whatever they wanted, but only I knew the truth. And who knows the truth? There's no need to rush. All you need is patience, because the next step was already mapped out, and no one, not her, not him, was prepared for what was to come. Because when justice decides to knock on the door, she knocks without making a fuss, and it hits only once. I thought I had seen everything, but I wasn't prepared for what came the next day. I woke up with the phone vibrating nonstop. When I opened it, the first video that appeared was from Rachel. She was sitting in the car, her eyes smudged with mascara, speaking in a trembling tone that I had never heard, not even as a child. Guys, I never imagined exposing this, but my father, my own father, stole my lottery ticket. I gave it as a gift with the agreement to share. He promised. And now he's turning his back on me. I'm devastated. She paused, took a deep breath as if trying to hold back a cry. I just wanted justice. I just wanted what's mine. The video ended with a share it so that the truth comes out. In minutes, it already had thousands of views. People writing, strength, dear, how absurd. Father like this should be ashamed. I stared at the screen like someone looking at a fire across the street, knowing that the fire will jump into your house sooner or later. I didn't answer. I just sat at the table with my coffee and breathed slowly. The second blow came from Eric. I didn't even follow it, but someone sent me the LinkedIn link, a post with a photo of a tie and the face of a suffering executive. We have to talk about financial abuse of the elderly in reverse. When parents, out of greed, betray their children's loyalty. My wife tried to act with love and generosity, but she was betrayed. The comments were from very well-groomed people saying, solidarity. Regrettable to see this. Ethics first. And suddenly I became an easy headline. Columbus resident has lottery dispute with daughter. Note was presented with verbal agreement, says family. And more. Shame on you, Mr. Harris. At the end of each comment. My door rang twice before 9 in the morning. In the first, a reporter with a red blazer and a ready smile asked, "Do you confirm that you took possession of the ticket that your daughter gave you with an agreement to share?" I replied with silence. In the second, a young man in a cap and microphone. "Mr. Donald, just a word. The city wants to hear from you." I nodded, "No," and closed the door. My neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, who always asked me for help with the trash, avoided me in the hallway. At the supermarket, the cashier who called me by name barely looked up, and I saw two young men whispering near the aisle of the masses. It's him, the guy who stole his daughter. I put the bread in the cart and moved on. Pain, when it is unfair, has a taste that cannot be described. But I had already decided, I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to compete on stage with anyone. I went into the house, took off my coat, and did what a man who has learned from life does when he has to go through the storm with his head held high. I organized. I turned on the printer, opened every link, every post, every comment. I printed everything. In black pen, I wrote down the date, the time, the URL. I made folders. Rachel's video, Facebook, 9:14 a.m. Eric's post, LinkedIn, 10:03 a.m. Canal 6 story, 11:27 a.m. I glued sticky notes, highlighted passages where she affirmed agreement, promise, division. Everything was very clean, very cold. What they called truth became cataloged paper, piled up like scrap metal on a workshop countertop. Meanwhile, the noise of the world grew outside. My phone rang emails. Old friends sent messages carefully like someone stepping on glass. "Donald, are you okay? Talk to me." I thanked him but said I needed time. And in the middle of the windstorm, what saved me was remembering what my wife said. When the world screams, you breathe. The air always comes back. And he did. Gradually, the air came back. I ate slowly, washed the dishes, sat in the chair by the window, and saw two sparrows fighting over the same crumb on the sill. Nature does not make mistakes. Each one tries to take what they can. The difference is that we have a choice, and I chose not to answer. Silence, which was once pain, was now a tool. My plan was not just to keep the ticket. It was to guard my honor, and I knew that honor is not announced. It proves itself. The day went by and the messages changed tones. Veiled threats arrived. If you don't speak up, we'll consider it true. Emotional blackmail arrived from unknown numbers. How can a father do this to his own daughter? And he even proposed a lawyer offering a quick agreement to avoid exposure. I laughed to myself. What they called an agreement, I called a surrender of the truth. And my truth now was priceless. In the afternoon, I sat at the table with the folders open, as if I were a mechanic in front of a disassembled engine. I checked each piece, prints, schedules, the sequence of events. In silence, I wrote a summary of what I witnessed at my own dinner, in my own home. The daughter who chose to humiliate her father with a $2 note, the cruise paid for with embezzled money, the phrase, "half is mine." And below I wrote in large letters, "Present." I closed the pen and leaned against the chair. The noise of the street seemed far away, and I realized, with a heavy calm, that I had two wars, that of money and that of honor. The money was already due. That of honor would require a testimony that I could not invent. But the truth likes to appear in the most unlikely places. The landline phone rang almost at 5. A number I didn't know. Answered. On the other side, a firm, old, paused voice. "Mr. Harris? This is William Whitaker, Eric's father." My body got cold. He continued, "I was at your Father's Day dinner. I think we need to talk. I saw and heard what happened at that table." I closed my eyes for a moment, as if thanking in silence. He cleared his throat straight away. "Can we meet tomorrow morning at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street? You will want to hear what I have to say. And if you want, I say it in public too." I breathed slowly, looked at the piles of papers, at the notebook with dates and times, and felt that something lined up inside like old gears coming back into place. I replied, "I'll be there, Mr. Whitaker." Turned off. I stood in the kitchen, my hand still on the phone, and only one question came into my head, cutting the air like a knife. What exactly did he see that night? And how far is he willing to go so that the world can also see? I woke up before the alarm clock that morning and sat on the edge of the bed for a while, feeling the cold floor under my feet, as if the body needed to remember that it was still here. I put on a clean shirt, rubbed water on my face, combed the little hair I had left, and left with the leather briefcase, not because of the need for paperwork, but because it gave me firmness. Murphy's Diner on 5th Street was already alive when I arrived. The sound of cutlery on the crockery, the griddle sizzling, the smell of bacon and strong coffee spilling across the room. I found Mr. William Whitaker in a booth by the window with his coat folded beside him. A tall man, shoulders still straight despite being 78 years old, eyes of one who has negotiated many difficult truths. He stood up slowly when he saw me, made a simple wave, and extended his hand respectfully. "Mr. Harris," he said, and his "sir" had the weight of one who does not waste a word. I sat down and he began without flourish, his voice low, firm. "I was at your Father's Day dinner. I saw your daughter throw that note in front of you and call it a gift. There was no agreement. There was no promise. There was no combination of half. There was only contempt." The word hit the table like a badly supported cup. I breathed and was quiet. It's curious how, when someone says out loud what you've experienced inside, the pain changes place. He put his phone between us, opened Facebook, typed slowly, without trembling. As a witness to the Father's Day dinner at Mr. Donald Harris's house, I confirmed that his daughter, Rachel, handed over a lottery ticket as a gift, without any negotiation about sharing winnings. The narrative circulating on social networks does not match what I witnessed. Mr. Harris is the rightful owner of that note and, in my opinion, a man of character. He read it aloud, looked at me as if asking for permission to tell the truth that is already obvious, and tapped publish. I watched the window. Outside, a delivery truck was unloading boxes. Inside, time seemed suspended for a second. The waitress, in a blue apron, brought fresh coffee and 2 plates of eggs, potatoes, and bacon. "On the house," she said, and called me darling, the way they called people like me when there was still delicacy in the world. Mr. Whitaker's cell phone flickered with a noise every few seconds. Comments pouring in, shares, people in the business community tagging him, old lawyers leaving, I read and trust. "My name carries some weight, Mr. Harris," he said, almost apologizing for it. "I've spent my whole life saying what I saw. Today will be no different." I thanked him with a voiceless wave. I ate little, I drank coffee. He told me that he had a difficult conversation with his own son, Eric. I didn't like what I saw in him in these last few months. He confessed, his eyes tired, not of age but of disappointment. You know, deep down we wanted our boys to be better than we were. And sometimes he discovers that he did not teach everything. His cell phone screen now showed comments from grown-ups. If Mr. Whitaker confirms it, I believe it. It changes the reading of the case. Honor is not outsourced. I felt that the noise outside began to slow down inside. It's strange, but the rumor of the world loses strength when the truth finds an authoritative voice. It wasn't about the money. It was about fixing the crooked line they wrote with my name. We ate in silence for a while, each with his own thoughts. He broke the silence with a sincere question. "What do you intend to do?" I spoke softly, looking at the cup. "Nothing more than necessary. Authentication, legal process, whatever it has to be. I don't want war. I want peace." He nodded, as if approving a job well done in the workshop. "Peace sometimes requires a tight screw," he said, and I smiled for the first time in days. Before we went, he suggested, "If I need to, I'll say it in public. Wherever you want. On camera, in the newspaper, wherever." I shook his hand gratefully from the inside out. "Thank you. Not for the post. For the courage to see." We left together. He got into a black sedan with a driver. I walked to my old car that needed 2 tries to get it the first time. When the engine started, it felt like it was my life igniting again. On the way home, I began to feel the effect of what he did. The phone vibrated with messages from old neighbors. "Donald, I just saw Mr. Whitaker's post. I'm glad someone spoke." Others saying, "I knew something was wrong with that Rachel video." And even a "sorry for having believed we don't know other people's houses." Arriving on my street, I noticed less harsh looks, a shy nod from the boy who always walks the dog, and Mrs. Jenkins called me back to take out the trash, as if the threads of everyday life had been reconnected. At home, I went back to my briefcases. I added to the context proofs section a printout of Mr. Whitaker's post, date and time, plus 2 prints of the comments of local business owners that attested to his credibility. It was like assembling an engine with aligned parts. When the moral gear fits, the noise disappears. But I knew that wounded pride doesn't die easily. Rachel began to change her tune. A new, more aggressive video. "My father manipulated my father-in-law. He's using his name to humiliate me." Eric shared it with a pompous paragraph about emotional manipulation. That's when I understood that the truth, when it enters a room, puts liars to rearrange chairs. Only this time the chairs were already marked. I sat on the porch with a coffee, closed my eyes and thought of my wife. I spoke softly, as if talking to a photograph. Today someone saw us. And suddenly I found myself doing something I hadn't done in a long time. I thanked him. Not because I won anything, but because I was not alone. The rest of the day came with better news. A serious journalist called me asking for an interview responsibly. A well-known lawyer sent a message saying, "No rush, but when you want, I can guide you without charging anything." And in a short call, Mr. Whitaker himself said he was available to, if necessary, formally testify. Night fell over Columbus with that fine cold, and I sat down again at the table, the note tucked away in the briefcase, the folders lined up, my heart less heavy. I thought this would be the breather before the calm, but fate had another page waiting. Because as soon as I turned off the kitchen light, My phone vibrated with an official notification. Invitation, award presentation ceremony, Ohio Lottery Commission, 10 a.m. They wanted publicity. I didn't look for a stage. But maybe, just maybe, a stage would be the right room for a kind of truth that falls silent and yet wins. And I had to decide, accept the ceremony and look into the eyes of an entire city, or continue in my silence until the last screw of this story. What do you think I chose? I accepted the ceremony, not out of vanity, nor to rub anything in anyone's face. I accepted because I wanted everything in the open, light on where lies like to live. The morning dawned cold, clear skies, and I put on my old suit, the navy blue one I bought for my wife's funeral, and a white shirt still with the crease marked, as if life asked me to posture. I arrived early at the Ohio Lottery Commission headquarters. The lobby was glowing with so much glass and metal, cameras being tested, microphones lined up, cables on the floor like exposed Venas. A badge girl ushered me into a private room where I met Janet Chen again. She greeted me with a sure handshake and a smile that said, "Rest assured." We checked documents and she explained to me what it would be like. A few words from the director, official confirmation, photos, and if I wanted, a short speech. I didn't know if there was a speech, but there was an old truth stored, and sometimes truth is all we need. Before entering the auditorium, I put my hands on the back of a chair and breathed. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. If this story is coming to you and makes some sense, enjoy this video and subscribe. Let's make this road find those who need to walk together. On stage, the lights were hot. The background showed the Ohio Lottery logo repeated, and a large check rested on two easels, white and blue, with my name printed in a way that I still found strange. The director said little. Janet introduced me as the legitimate winner, after all the security check procedures, and invited the press for questions afterwards. I walked to the pulpit slowly, unhurriedly, and leaned my fingers against the microphone. I looked at the audience. I saw curious faces, some disbelieving, others simply tired of bad news. My voice came out low but firm. Life is like a gear. What you turn with love will one day come back. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it comes back in a way that we don't imagine. But come back. There was a silence of seconds, those that are worth a life. And then the applause came. Polite. Strong. I was about to walk away when I heard a sound tearing through the back of the auditorium, a familiar voice charged with urgency. "He's lying. That note was mine. He promised to share." It was Rachel. She entered without asking permission, her heels hitting the floor like a hammer, her eyes red, a phone in her hand recording, and behind her, Eric with his chin locked, an air of someone who came to bet the rest of the chips. Security moved fast but not violently. Two men approached, asked her to back off, but the cameras had already turned. The press smells this type of earthquake. "Can you comment?" a reporter shouted, pointing a microphone extended by a cable that looked like a long arm. I felt my whole body ask for calm, and I did. "I can," I replied, and my voice came back like water on barren ground. The note was given to me as a gift on Father's Day. There was no agreement, clause, promise. There was one phrase said with disdain that I myself would like to forget. Rachel tried to interrupt me, crying loudly, but security lightly held her forearm. She broke free and pointed at me. "He manipulated my father-in-law. He's using Eric's dad's name." I took a breath without turning my face and said again, "The most valuable gift someone can give is to reveal who they really are." The sound of my own sentence seemed to cross the auditorium and return like a bell. A few journalists put down their pens. Janet stared at the floor for a second, then lifted her chin. Security led her out carefully, and Eric, vexed, left his phone in his pocket and trailed off, the fastest step elegance would allow. The questions came in waves. If I was going to sue someone, if I intended to move, if I had plans with the money. I answered like someone adjusting a carburetor. No rush, no exaggeration. I am not going to speculate on lawsuits. As for the plans, I would like to use it responsibly, to sort out my things and to support people who work and need a push, and, above all, to live with dignity. As I got off the stage, Janet caught up with me in the side aisle and said in a whisper that was worth a hug, "You were classy." I thanked him with a wave and agreed to take the protocol photos next to the large check. I smiled only with my eyes. The way I learned when I didn't want to sell myself entirely. Outside, the parking lot reflected the white light of midday. I was walking with the lottery envelope and a briefcase under my arm when I saw, in the distance, Rachel leaning against the BMW, arguing with Eric. She spoke with her hands. He spliced short sentences. I saw his father, Mr. Whitaker, standing a few yards away, a fixed point in a shaky line drawing. He saw me and nodded. Not sad, not for me, but for what was happening there. I went straight, not out of pride, but for survival. In the car, I sat down, closed the door, and waited a minute before turning on the ignition. I needed my breath to find the right rhythm. As I parked at home, I decided that I wasn't going to watch the news that day. I made a black tea, sat on the couch and let the silence cover me like a blanket with the smell of sunshine. And it was in this silence that the phone rang with a number I didn't know. Answered. On the other side, a neutral voice introduced itself as that of a TV producer, offering a roundtable to debate family ethics, live that week. I said I would think about it, and hung up. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw an envelope stuck in the gate grill. Got. It was a formal warning. Lawyer. I read the first lines, and the world narrowed into a crack. Extrajudicial notification. Claim of right. Attempt to reach an agreement. I closed my eyes, folded the paper, and put my hand on my chest. The ceremony was over, but the paper battle began there. And I asked myself, with the calm of someone who knows how to wait for the next move, how far would they be willing to go now that the truth has shone in the light? The day after the ceremony, the city seemed to have woken up already knowing what happened inside that auditorium. The video of Rachel screaming in the middle of the press went faster than gossip in a bakery line, and I didn't have to watch anything to understand the tide. It was enough to go out to get the newspaper in the backyard and see two neighbors who had previously dodged me give me a short wave, a weightless, "Good morning." An old friend from the workshop called me. "Donald, hold on with class." I thanked him and returned to my silence. On the other side, the house of cards began to fall. Eric's father, Mr. Whitaker, reinforced his testimony, now in a short interview on the local channel. I was there, I saw it, and I don't bow down to any convenient version. His phrase circulated on LinkedIn, and like gasoline on the fuse, ignited what was missing. Customers of Eric's company began to send contract review emails, asking for redemption, requesting a wallet transfer. On Tuesday, a former colleague of his wrote publicly, "Wealth management is based on trust. When personal conduct corrodes it, mathematics loses." On Wednesday, even drier, "Reputation is the main asset. I lost mine because I believed in those who didn't deserve it. I didn't vibrate. I just watched the reality bill charge the bill. At home, I did what I had to do. I deposited the prize in an account managed by a trust office, with layers of protection that the plain-spoken, detail-minded lawyer and accountant suggested: a revocable trust in my name, an LLC to insure assets, a P.O. box mailing address, a secondary phone. Legal notices filtered through them before they reached me. "You are not hiding," said the lawyer, a woman with a soft voice and a clinical look. "It's just putting locks on doors that were previously wide open." I signed the paperwork with my wife's fountain pen out of stubbornness and memory. No commemorative photos, no champagne. I wanted clay taken from the boot, not confetti on the floor. At the end of the afternoon, the first letter arrived from the office that notified me on the day of the ceremony. Proposal for a conciliatory agreement. Pompous words trying to wrap the old story in a new package. My lawyer let out a no so short that it could cut metal. "You are not in litigation. It doesn't need an agreement. We archive it." At the same time, I cleaned the house from the inside, not of dust, but of wound remains. I deactivated my old Facebook profile, opened another one with close friends, blocked strange numbers, changed the doorbell to silent mode. The world kept talking, but inside the voice that mattered was mine. Low, patient, firm. At night, I sat on the couch and looked at the dark from the window as if looking at a still lake. And I thought of something that might be useful for you too. There are wounds that don't close with noise, they close with decision. On the third day, news clippings about Eric began to arrive. Funds under review, key client departure, internal communication calling for calm. People who a month earlier appeared hugging the two in barbecue photos began to disappear from their networks. Comments of pride were replaced by silence. At the same time, he learned from third parties that Rachel had sought a lawyer to prove verbal agreement, received 2 no's in a row. One of them, honest, wrote, "No case. Gift belonging to the recipient." Later, I learned that she knocked on the door of a third office and it demanded an advance that she could not give without using a credit card already at the limit. The floor beneath her feet, built with a facade, began to crack. Did they knock on my door? Not this week. Not while there was an audience. They preferred the internet, until the algorithm got tired. Here, I was drawing another path. The lawyer and the accountant sat down with me at a simple table, without expensive wood, to think about the aftermath. I told them I didn't want big cars or a house with a gate that was too high. I wanted 2 projects. To start over with my hands, a small restoration workshop, the smell of oil and metal giving me back a place in the world, and to create a simple foundation to help parents who are raising children alone, the kind of people I know in the eye. Nothing with my name on a golden plate, I said. I prefer results to plates. They smiled, as if meeting a rare customer. We have closed the draft of a donation fund with clear criteria: health, education, work tools. It's curious, but when you put the money in the right place, the heart also finds a place to stay. And look, follow me. As much as everything seems already decided, the moment that turned my life for good was still around the corner. That Thursday afternoon, emails arrived at the same time. From Eric's bank, notifying credit review. From his grandson's school, asking for regularization of overdue tuition. Of the association of the condominium where they lived, charging an old fine. I read that from afar, as if I saw a black cloud and knew which way the wind was blowing. I didn't want the fall, but I also didn't reach out before their stumble admitted where it started. My lawyer, cautiously, reinforced 3 barriers. No conversation without registration, no meeting without a witness, no transfer without a contract. Agreed. He wanted justice, not revenge. In the evening, I received a message from Mrs. Jenkins. "I left you an apple cake on the porch." The gesture, small, was bigger than any check I could sign. I shared a slice, had it with tea and silence. And I thought, maybe that's what peace is all about, doing the right thing and accepting that there are things that don't depend on us. On Friday, a former friend of Rachel's wrote to me apologizing for having liked it without knowing it, and in a low voice, said that the couple had been walking one step of the abyss for a long time. Blown cards, expensive parties to keep up, appearances, a plan to monetize the story that didn't work. I read it. I deleted it. I didn't hold grudges or gossip. My occupation that morning was different. To open the briefcase, check the note in his briefcase, not out of suspicion but out of a ritual of gratitude, and close it again as if turning off a light in a room that was finally in order. The weekend arrived with a small sun and the sound of lawnmowers in the neighborhood. I went down to the basement, cleaned an old countertop and oiled a set of keys I inherited from my father. As the metal gleamed, I promised myself that money would never rule me. I was the one who was going to be in charge of what he would do in the world I reach. And it was at that very moment, with the house tidy inside and out, that the doorbell rang. Not the silent mode, but the insistent ringing that jumps over any adjustment. I went to the door. Through the window I saw the short and agitated silhouette, the shoulders slumped, the hand holding something like a bundle of papers. I opened slowly. It was Rachel, her eyes red, her voice a thread. "Dad, we need to talk." I held the doorknob for a second, feeling in the palm of my hand all the years compressed there, and thought, how far does the cry for help go? When does he arrive carrying the claws of the past? I opened the door and took a second to recognize my own daughter in that haggard face. The smudged makeup, the deep dark circles, the hair tied up in a hurry, the clothes wrinkled like someone who slept dressed. She entered without asking, looked around as if my house were foreign. "Dad, we need to talk." Her voice almost didn't come out. A thread stuck in her throat. I led her to the living room and sat in the usual armchair, the same one I kept for mourning, for bills, for loneliness. She stood on the edge of the sofa, squeezing herself inside, and let go at once. "Eric is gone. The bank is threatening to take over the house. Jake's school fees, the condominium association. I can't hold it anymore." She took a short breath, pursed her lips, and came the phrase she thought would save everything. "I need help. Only $2 million. Just to start over. $2 million. Just like someone who asks for a glass of water." I didn't answer. I kept looking at her hands, those hands that I had held so many times when they were small, cold with fever, dirty with dirt, shy of fear. Now they trembled. Dad, I know I made a mistake. I know that the internet has made everything worse. But you've always been there for me. You have always saved me. She advanced a little, tried to touch my hand. I retreated just enough to feel with painful clarity the distance that time had carved between us. Rachel, I said, and my name in her mouth seemed to hang in the air. It's not about the internet. It's not about the city. It's about what you did to me in my house, in front of my memory, in front of your mother that you say you love. She started crying in an ugly way, without preparation, without a camera, without an audience. I was scared, Dad. Eric pressing, the bills arriving. I thought you would understand. I exaggerated. I listened without interrupting, as if I were listening to the sea hitting the same rocks as always. You took money out of my account without asking. He gave me a $2 note like someone throwing leftovers into a bowl. Then I told the world that I stole from you, and now it's here asking for $2 million. I spoke without harshness, only with truth. She swallowed her tears like someone drinking bitter medicine and tried to reorganize herself. I'll pay, Dad. I pay every penny later. We sign a contract. I make a video denying everything. I talk to Eric's dad. I change. I promise I will change. I looked into her eyes and I saw there not the girl I raised, but the woman that the world demanded and molded in the way that gave her advantage. Rachel, money reveals who we are, it doesn't change us. And you showed me who you are. She shook her head sadly, angrily. Are you saying you won't help me? That will let me lose everything, that will leave me homeless, and Jake, he's your grandson. I felt a sting in my chest when I heard his name. A boy who is not to blame for what the great ones choose. My grandson has my door. There always will be. But you? I dropped the phrase because certain things don't hold up to explanation. She got up, started walking around like a lioness trapped in a cage that she built herself. You've always said that family is everything. And it is, I replied. But family is not money. She stopped, looked at the floor, and came with the usual small gun. I say things when I'm scared, Dad. I made a fool of myself. Help me just this once, that's all. I stood up slowly, my age speaking on my knee, on my shoulder, but my voice entirely. You taught me the price of love when you turned affection into a transaction. Today I just want peace. She closed her eyes, and when she opened it, there was more fatigue than anger. So that's it. You're going to stand there with your money, with your morals, and you're going to watch me sink. I took a deep breath. I don't need to see anything. I need to exist without being used. She let out a short, wounded laugh, which was not irony, but a withdrawal. Money made you cruel. No, I said, and felt my wife sitting next to me in the unseen. Money has set me free. For a moment I almost reached out, because a father is an animal that offers himself, even if he is wounded. But there, I understood that reaching out would only be postponing the fall she needed to call her own. Rachel, I added quietly, I can refer you to people to negotiate with the bank, a personal finance consultancy. I can see a good public school for Jake until you get back together. I can help you with what's fair. I don't give money without responsibility. She stared at me as if she saw a stranger in her own chart. You've changed. I went back to who I was before I forgot myself because of you. She picked up the bundle of papers she brought and it slipped off her lap. There was billing, condominium mail, and a letter from the lawyer that she thought would scare me. Claim of right, agreement, equitable division. I looked and didn't touch. Take it back, I said, because jurists don't write love, only contract. And here, what broke was love. She bit her lip, put the papers away in a hurry as if picking up a fallen deck. Okay, I'll remember that when you're really old and need me. I wanted to say, I'm already really old, but I let the silence answer. She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the handle, didn't turn around. Last chance, she said without threat, just tiredness. 2 million and I'll erase everything. You don't erase what you saw, I replied. Face each other. She opened the door and the cold wind came in, taking some of the smell of home out. When the door slammed behind him, I stood in the hallway. The wood was still vibrating from the farewell. I walked to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and sat down. I didn't win. I survived the temptation to solve with money what time needs to teach. And for a minute I realized that peace has a high price, but it is the only one that makes up for it. I closed my eyes and heard in the depths of my memory my wife's voice. "Breathe. You're on the way." And when I opened it, the house was lighter. The clock on the wall seemed to mark another kind of time. I went to the bedroom, picked up an empty suitcase and propped it up on the floor. Peace also moves. And I asked myself, with my heart set and my hand on the zipper, where does a man go who chooses to start over when everyone expected him to bend down? Months later, I no longer woke up with the same weight on my chest. I sold the house in Columbus calmly, without announcing much, like someone dismantling an old altar piece by piece, thanking and keeping only what fits in the pocket of memory. I signed the papers on a cold Tuesday, and by Thursday I was walking onto a Dayton street where life seemed to be moving at a pace I was taking. It was an area of low sheds, worn slabs and family workshops, smell of oil, rubber, heated iron. I stopped in front of a simple building with 2 sliding doors and a small square window. Woods and Harris Restoration was born, the name half inherited, half reinvented, but with the whole soul of what I always was. The first day was about sweeping up old dust, opening jammed windows and hearing the echo of my own voice saying good morning into the void. I took the leather band from my tools and hung it on a wall, lining up key by key as if reciting prayer. On the second day, 3 resumes arrived from young men from the region, all younger than the memories I carry on my back. Mason, who was 24 years old, and in the hands of someone who learns quickly. Luis, 27, with a shy smile and determination in his eyes. And Theo, 19, who knew little, but looked at each engine as if it were a treasure map. I hired all 3, not out of pity, but out of recognition. I saw in them what they once saw in me. When the first Bel Air 1956 entered the shed, painted a red that called for the road, I felt my back straighten, changing pads, aligning carburetors, giving right torque. Each gesture returned a piece of me to its place. "Mr. Harris, this screw here always dusts," said Mason. "It only dusts when we're in a hurry," I replied, and smiled. The workshop became a small house. At 8, the noise of tools. At 10, coffee in a styrofoam cup. At noon, sandwich on the countertop. At 4, the smell of metal mixing with some old rock in a sound box. Customers arrived slowly, first by referral, a man who kept a 1967 Mustang under a thick cover in the backyard, a girl with a '69 Camaro inherited from her father, a collector with patience for deadlines that respect the time of the hand. Each car had a story, and I learned to listen. The scratch that was a farewell, the dent that was a hurried kiss on the bumper, the rust that a summer's rain left as a souvenir. And while the workshop was taking its first steps, another seed took root. I set up, with the help of the trust office, a simple fund to support single parents. No fuss, no photos of a large check, no ribbon cut in front of a banner. Only clear criteria: help for rent arrears, school supplies, medical consultation that insurance does not cover, tire change before a harsh winter. I received the demands by email, read each case slowly, and signed the money orders with an ordinary blue pen. The accounting lady sent me a report at the end of the first month. "Mr. Harris, 14 families served." I replied only with, "Thank you," and went to sweep the workshop once again. In my office, a clean square of light went through the canvas curtain and drew a rectangle on the floor. On the wall, I hung 3 things: the photo of my wedding, my wife smiling as if sending away any shadow, a smaller photo of her holding baby Rachel, a tiny bow in her hair, and next to it in a simple frame the Powerball ticket. Dry, clean, preserved. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what the world tried to make of me, and what I decided not to be. The frame did not shine. It was made of matte wood, just like everything I've chosen to keep since then. In Dayton, no one called me the Columbus millionaire. It was Mr. Harris, the man with the old cars. I liked that. It was a more honest identity, less noisy, closer to the ground. In the morning, the people at the corner cafe already knew my order. Black, no sugar, and asked me about deadlines, parts that don't arrive, a stubborn carburetor. On Saturdays, a boy from the neighborhood would cycle by and stand at the door watching what we were doing, as if watching television from another time. Sometimes I would call, put a glove on his hand and let a screw that I had already loosened loose, just for him to feel the pleasure of the gesture. They told me to buy a big house. He didn't want to. I chose a 1-story house on a quiet street, a narrow balcony, and an oak tree in the backyard. The nights there were silent. A soft silence which does not judge, does not poke, does not charge. I made tea, sat down, and watched the moon trim the edges of the day. Rachel called a few times. An unknown number. A call without a message. In others, the short message appeared. Dad, we need to talk. I didn't answer. Not out of revenge, but out of respect for what I said to myself. Silence, finally, ceased to be pain and became a choice. On other occasions, messages came across. People asking if I wasn't going to enjoy life, if I didn't want a car to my height, if it wasn't time to have fun. I answered with nail polish and simple wine in the glass. The height I want is the floor. And speaking of the ground, Dayton taught me again how to put it underfoot. The city did not require an explanation of my story. He asked for service, and I always knew how to deliver service. Sometimes a client would tell me a whole life in 15 minutes as if the open hood were confessional. One man spoke of the divorce, a lady, of the son who did not return. I listened more than I said. I understood that many people arrive at the workshop carrying a car and miss it. The boys learned quickly. Theo, who had a heavy hand, learned to respect torque. Luis, who spoke little, turned golden ears to rolling noise. Mason began to put together budgets with clockwork honesty. At the end of each week, we held a small meeting. What worked, what to learn, what not to repeat. Here we don't fool anyone, I repeated. Whoever wants a shortcut takes another road. And that's what I believed. From time to time, someone recognized my name and put the pieces together. Are you? I smiled out of the corner of my mouth. I'm the man who fixes old cars. And I left it at that. It was not an escape. It was precision. There are things that, when it is said, mess up the place where you finally settled down. The foundation, as I imagined, was moving at the same pace. No headlines, just bank confirmation and a thank you, lost in the subject of the email. Once a father left a handwritten note at the gate of the workshop. I bought my daughter's medicines. I don't know how to thank you. I took a picture and kept it in the things that weigh little and are worth a lot folder. One rainy day, the frame of the lottery ticket reflected a ray of light that came through the window and touched my wife's photo. The reflection created a crooked drawing, and I stared for long minutes as if deciphering a sign. I thought, I wasn't the one who turned my life around. It was life that returned me to the right side. And if you're here so far, it's because that right side speaks to some part of you as well. Revenge, if it existed, was in the silence of things that are put back in place. I didn't have to wish anything bad on anyone. Life is in charge of teaching what has to be learned. And sometimes the lesson hurts, as it hurt me. One autumn afternoon, while I was adjusting a stubborn distributor, the shop phone rang. I answered without taking off the glove. A serious voice stepped up, too polite to be a hoax, and asked for a meeting, to deal with a large donation with a specific purpose. I hung up and stared at the open car, the metal shining in the half-light. I smiled to myself, because I knew that before I closed this story I still needed to say one last thing, the one that was left without a voice when it all came crashing down. And it is precisely this that I will tell you now in the final part. Are you coming with me? Today at 73 I end my days in a simple way, sitting on the porch with a warm coffee in my hands and the smell of oil coming from the workshop mixing with the Dayton wind. In front of me the sun hides behind the open fields and paints the sky with that orange tone that seems to be goodbye, but which deep down is a promise of a new beginning. The distant sound of the engines has replaced the noise of trials, and the silence, which once hurt me as a punishment, is now my greatest comfort. Rachel never came again. He sent a letter months ago, handwritten as before, asking for forgiveness bluntly. I read it, kept it, but I didn't answer. Forgiveness, I learned, is not always a dialogue. Sometimes it's just the act of not holding a grudge. I heard that she moved to Cleveland, got a modest job, and that Jake is doing well, growing healthy. Eric, his name has been lost in time, and maybe it's better that way. As for Mr. Whitaker, we still exchanged short messages. How's the workshop? Running well. What about consciousness? Even better. He laughs, and life goes on. No trophy, no headline, just the serenity of those who paid the just price for their own peace. And you know, at the end of it all, I realized that the real fortune was never the lottery check. It was being able to choose the right silence, the one that heals, not the one that swallows. The lesson that stayed with me is simple, but heavy, like the tools I use every day. Love without respect becomes debt, and dignity, when preserved, is the only good that no one can steal. Time, this patient master, has shown me that life pays back without needing revenge. Sometimes the change comes in the form of peace, others in the form of a clean look in front of the mirror. And I want to tell you this with an open heart. Whatever you are experiencing, do not negotiate your peace. No love, no relative, no fear is worth the price of losing oneself. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of something or made you think a little more about the value of calm, I thank you for staying with me so far. Really, your like is like a hug that warms up this channel and gives me strength to continue sharing these memories. And if you want to come back for another coffee with me, sign up. It's the most beautiful way to say, see you later. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching, so I know how far this conversation has come. And it activates the bell, so you don't lose it when the coffee is ironed again. I stay here on the balcony, watching the wind play with the curtains of the workshop and thinking about how many stories still live in the wrinkles that life has given me. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.